So good morning, church family. Just before we get into the message today, we just want to kind of update some changes that we're going to be doing. As we go through this process, as we said last week, that was 6 weeks, 6 Sundays. This is 7th, and we're hearing and we're learning. We're going to be changing our format. Starting May the 10th, we're going to be going to a 45-minute format. We're going to condense some things. We know that when you're in your homes, you're with families, you've got a lot of other things going on. It's not like being here in this room with us, and so we want to be able to be maybe more effective and let you know that we're being mindful of you as well. So May the 10th, we're going to be starting a 45-minute format starting at 10:30, not 11:15. At 10:30 so that we can have everything kind of done and wrapped up before you're starting to think about what do we need to do for lunch and all of those things. So just put that on your calendar or whatever you need to do to remember we're going to start live at 10:30 on May the 10th. Today we're carrying on with our series in John. So John chapter 20 verses 24 to 31, we're going to be talking about Thomas. I don't know about you, but sometimes when someone is talking and telling us a story or an event, and we start hearing it, the words go through our mind, I doubt that. The story or the information that we're getting just seems a little bit off. It doesn't make sense in some ways, and so we're a little skeptical, and actually we're raised to be skeptical. Look at all the advertising that comes our way. We see it, we hear it, everywhere that we go there's advertising, and these products all say that they're great, they're awesome, you should get them, you need it, and yet in the back of our minds we know this is advertising. And we need to use discernment, which is a polite way of saying be skeptical, not just to go out and believe everything that's being said, to kind of think our way through it. And so we're raised to be skeptical. Actually, there is a magazine out called The Skeptical Inquirer, and there's a whole movement based on skepticism. In that world of skepticism, we also have to ask, what about faith? What about faith? Faith and skepticism, faith and doubt, we're going to be talking about today. And sometimes I feel like they're on opposite sides. They're opposites, just like last week when we talked about hope and lament, saying, you know what, they're more siblings than opposites, even though we think of them as opposites. And it's the same, I believe, as faith and doubt. They're siblings. They're not opposites. I'm pretty confident, actually, that all of us have gone through doubts about our faith. And we actually downplay this part of our journey where we tend to view doubt as a negative thing. But the Bible does not ignore the doubters. It actually seems like God has more tolerance for doubt than many Christians have. We really don't need to deny or to fight that fear, to fight our doubt. What we really need to do is express it. And just being transparent, I've doubted my faith. I've doubted what's said in the Bible. I've doubted God. I not only have doubted, but even now, when I'm looking at things or thinking through something and it doesn't quite make sense, I doubt and I wonder, and these thoughts come up in my mind. But I've come to a place that I think it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. You see, doubt has played a big role in forming who I am, forming my faith and my growth in my faith, and it's made me to be a better person, a better follower of Jesus. You see, the opposite of doubt, the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Where there is certainty, there is no room for faith. Paul Tillich puts it this way: doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is one element of faith. There's another quote that I like that kind of makes sense as well. The opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Certainty is missing the point entirely. Faith includes noticing the mess, the emptiness, the uncertainty and discomfort and letting it be there until some light returns. You see, doubt is not an enemy, and it's not something that needs to be fought. Doubt actually grows our faith. We don't have the answers. We don't have all the answers, that for sure, but there is much of life, much of uncertainty in our lives. And the issues can't be just removed by some glib answers that we get, that we give actually along the way. We throw out things like, well, God is enough, or God is in control, or the one that really kind of works a lot we throw out is God works in mysterious ways. And we throw out these words, but actually those words kind of feel empty because there's an easy answer, but there's not an easy answer really when it comes to doubt, because the first thing that we need to do is acknowledge the truth of how we feel. There are many stories in the Bible of doubting people, and oftentimes our heroes of the Bible, they didn't earn that title because they had no doubt, but because they believed, they lived with doubt. They lived their faith with doubt, not because they had no doubt. At the same time, there are a lot of stories in the Bible that negative things happen because of doubt. And the book of James points to the fact that prayers laden with doubt aren't answered. And sometimes that's part of the struggle, is we have both stories of doubt and we have stories saying doubt creates problems as well. But we can't ignore both sides of this issue. And some of our key people, the heroes that we look at, Abraham and Sarah, doubted God's promise of a child. Actually, Sarah laughed at one point. Job, a great man of faith, doubted God's goodness. Moses doubted that God could use him to lead the people out of Egypt and beyond up to the promised land. Gideon doubted God could use him to turn the tide against Israel's enemies. The nation of Israel seemed like they lived in constant doubt. And today in our John series, we're going to look at Thomas, who I think we mistitle when we say doubting Thomas, because he didn't doubt. It actually isn't a good English translation. He was just being honest with what he didn't know. He didn't know how to think, and so he was being honest with it. You see, the real issue isn't doubt. It's what we do with doubt. Doubt can keep us from following God, or it can increase our faith even as we feel uncertain. What made the Bible stories, the stories of doubt, great was that these people acted in spite of the uncertainty that they felt. You see, God isn't scared by the uncertainty and by our doubt. So let's read the passage, John chapter 20, verses 24 to 29. It says, "Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. And so the other disciples said to him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe.' A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' And then he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe.' Thomas said to him, 'My Lord and my God.' And then Jesus told him, 'Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.'" For whatever reason, Thomas wasn't with the disciples the first time they saw Jesus. And so when they gathered next, they were telling him, "Hey, Jesus is alive." It wasn't as if they were in a group and only one of them stepped forward and said, "Hey, Thomas, you need to know this." The word says that they kept telling him over and over again, "We've seen Jesus. We've seen Jesus. Maybe they thought if they said it to Thomas enough, he'd believe, or maybe if they spoke it loud enough, it would sink in, but that wasn't where Thomas was. Thomas wasn't at a place where those words just met him, and my paraphrase of what Thomas said is basically, I won't believe unless I touch the wounds myself. You see, Thomas actually was trying to work through what was happening in a way that he could understand it. And so he said this. He said it out loud. And here's a point that I think we need to know is faith can grow when we acknowledge our doubt. Here's the point. Thomas voiced his doubt. Thomas felt like the information that he was getting in was a little off. It didn't make sense in his mind, and so he went where we go when we feel like information is a little off. It's like, I doubt it. He can't wrap his mind around Jesus being raised from the dead. Yes, he saw Jesus raise other people from the dead, but who's going to raise Jesus? Who's going to bring him back from the dead? And so he came into this group again, these disciples, with this uncertain feeling. In order to grow in faith, our doubt needs to be revealed and acknowledged by us. What we're feeling. We need to admit that we have real doubts. Did Thomas sin when he voiced his doubt? I don't think so. I think he was being authentic. See, doubt is not the same as disbelief. I think we would be in a better place if we would voice our doubts and our mental struggles. It's one thing we really need to be praying about. Just say, God, help me with this. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense in our minds, and it doesn't make it any less true that it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense, and we're trying to wrestle with the things that just don't make sense. That faith, life is messy. But we're trying to live out a true faith, not just platitudes that people give us. I think one reason doubt is difficult for us to wrestle is because we try to deal with it on our own. We think that people will think less of us, and there's a reason for that. You may have voiced your doubt, and others just step in with an answer. Well, you need to trust more, or they question our level of faith and even the core of our Christianity. There's this feeling that if we doubt, if we voice the things that we're uncertain of, that we're not good Christians. And so we keep it in, thinking that there's something wrong with us, thinking that no one else seems to have these questions because they're telling me I shouldn't have these questions. And actually, I think that kind of response diminishes the grace and the depth of faith that God is giving. There's another reason that we keep it in, and Thomas shows us why our thinking is off, actually, that we have equated acknowledging doubt with displeasing God. God isn't displeased with us when we're open with Him. God doesn't judge us when we doubt. A week after Thomas voices his doubt, Jesus shows up in the room where all the disciples are gathered. And guess what? Thomas is here. A week later, he is hanging out with his friends, with the other disciples. And that tells me something about how he's wrestling. He didn't just walk away. He's thinking about it. For a whole week, Thomas had been in this uncertain place. And Jesus' words to Thomas actually shows that he knew what Thomas had said to the other disciples when they told him, hey, we've seen Jesus alive. But Jesus didn't come into that room with condemnation toward Thomas. Actually, Jesus walks into the room, and the very first thing that he says is peace. Peace be with you. He walks into the room with peace, and then I can see him turning to Thomas and putting out his hands and saying, hey, Thomas, touch me. And then Jesus says, stop becoming an unbeliever and become a believer. I know that's not what most English translations say, but it's a more accurate translation. You see, I think in a verbal picture, Thomas was on a faith road trip. He had witnessed Jesus' death. And in despair, he started walking away from Jesus. He was shutting down. Because of that uncertainty that he was feeling, he was protecting his heart. And I think that's a pretty natural human thing to do. He had witnessed his death, and in despair, he was walking away because Jesus didn't do what Thomas expected of the Messiah. So in his despair, in the pain that he was feeling, in that uncertainty that he was feeling, in that doubt, he pulled away. We tend toward the same thing. Life isn't happening the way that we expect it, and so we may not say, I blame God, but we start acting as we blame God because we're trying to figure it out, and we kind of go into this protecting, covering our heart, protecting ourselves kind of mode, and I think that's where Sarah was in Genesis 18. Abraham was entertaining 3 friends. And these visitors reaffirmed to Abraham that Sarah was going to have a baby, and Sarah overheard. She had heard this before. It wasn't the first time. There were a couple other times that she heard that she was going to get pregnant in her old age, but it just wasn't happening, and actually she just keeps getting older. She had gone through menopause. The expected, what was promised, hadn't happened. And this time when she heard it, she laughed. It was beyond her comprehension, beyond her belief, and in her doubt, she laughed. And the visitors said, hey, Sarah, why did you laugh? And she said, I didn't laugh. And they said, yes, you did. And here's what I take. You see, they didn't call her out because she doubted. They called her out because she lied. They didn't say, hey, why are you doubting? They said, why did you laugh? Why did you, and then lie? You see, Jesus didn't condemn Thomas either. He didn't call him out for his doubt. You see, God is interested in our hearts, not in some kind of phony relationship. Sometimes what's going on the inside of us is doubt, and that's okay. Our journey of faith is messy, and there's a lot of uncertainty in it, and that is life. We know that now as much as ever in the world that we're living in, everything that's changing, and it feels like we just get our feet underneath us, and then they change the rules a little bit, and the understanding of everything, and so it's messy, and we're having people ask, so where's God in all this? And I totally get that. I can't say it enough. It doesn't make you a bad person or a bad follower of Jesus. We can't hide it from God, and that's not what he wants anyway. You see, an authentic relationship means that we need to be real with God and tell him what's going on in our hearts, and that includes our doubts. Which moves us to the next thing, is living our faith with our doubts. Living our faith with our doubts. A common misconception is that doubt is damaging to our faith. But God uses our doubts to produce a richer faith. Philip Yancey said, doubt always coexists with faith, for in the presence of certainty, who would need faith at all? I once heard doubt compared to an immunization. In order to help your body fight off future infection or diseases, we get a shot, a small dose of the virus, so that our body can build up antibodies, so that we can fight off what's coming in the future. And that's kind of where we are right now with COVID. We're just hoping and praying that a vaccine can come along. And the same is true for doubt. When we're infected with doubt, it forces us to seek answers for the questions that we have, to to reveal within ourselves the uncertainty that we have. And ultimately, when we voice that, we can voice that uncertainty. When we do that, we end up stronger because our trust of God in uncertainty has grown. It's not that all of a sudden everything becomes more certain, but that our uncertainty has diminished because we know God is there. That's kind of where Thomas ended up. Thomas expressed his stronger, deeper, authentic faith when he says, "My Lord and my God." I think it's one of the most profound professions of faith in Scripture, and every word in that text, in that statement, is powerful and meaningful. He still had uncertainty, but he was able to say, "I can trust you, Jesus." The reality is that we all have to come to accept that we cannot be 100% sure of almost anything. See, we're finite beings trying to grasp bigger things that are beyond our minds, bigger than our minds can really handle, because the things that we see as opposed to each other aren't necessarily opposed. Some people want to live life desperately convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are correct, that the way they see things are the way it is, and we need to all see it that way. But faith is believing in things that we cannot see and trusting God during the uncertainty. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." You see, faith isn't based in physical evidence, but a confidence in God in our uncertainty. That doesn't mean that I don't wonder and I don't doubt. It means that I do actually, and when I wonder and doubt, I can place my confidence in God even as I feel uncertain. I can't prove my faith in immeasurable means, but I can say this, that throughout my life, I've had a lot of reasons to put my faith in God in the uncertain times. Do I doubt? Yeah, I doubt. But these doubts have actually caused me to be open, to be honest, to wrestle, to try and figure it out. These doubts have taught me that faith is not based on right beliefs, on right ideas, and right living. That's actually the opposite of faith. That's certainty. That certainty is more about control than it is about faith. It's about, God, I need to understand in order to have faith, and really, I need to not understand in order to have faith. Early in my faith journey, things were much more black and white. They were right and wrong. You were either in or you were out. And actually, sometimes I think it's easier to live life that way, to see the world in black and white, to see Scripture in black and white, to see God in black and white, to force Him into this world in a black and white way. I think it's easier, but actually it also led to a judgmental way of looking at people. Almost looking down on others because they didn't see things the same way. They didn't see the things the same way of how other people believed that this is a right in a certain way. And now my faith is deepened as I've worked through those doubts, because those right and wrong ways, that certainty has not always been true. So my faith is deepened because I've had to work through those things, through the doubts, and some doubts keep coming, and it causes me to keep looking into the uncertainty and trusting God that He has His hand on us even when we feel uncertain. And I wouldn't trade my faith today for anything. I wouldn't even trade the uncertainty, because that's where my faith grows. My prayer is that you too live with doubts, with trust in God because of the uncertainty, not trying to force it to be certain, to trust Him in the uncertainty. So just a couple of questions again for you to kind of think about this in your own mind or talking with the people around you. A couple of questions. First is, how have you experienced doubt and faith in your life? I know it's there. How have you experienced it? And then number two, what have you done to wrestle with your doubts? In other words, do you try to force a certainty in? Or is your faith growing because of the uncertainty? And then the last one, we often say, just share around the table the people that you're talking with or sharing food with today, is to share with others how your faith has grown because of the doubts, because of the uncertainty. So God, I pray that you use your word in our lives, that we would trust you in uncertainty, not in try and force something, but to just trust you with the uncertainty that we often have, because you are God and you are trustworthy. In Jesus' name, amen.